my god! Oh, oh my god! Oh, ah.
Nothing makes you feel smaller than watching a huge storm wreck everything around you. Heck, just watching some of these clips is enough to make you think twice about stepping outside. From freak hailstorms and lightning strikes to gale force winds and tornadoes, it's time to marvel at some of the most extreme storm footage ever caught on camera. In April 2021, the U.S. state of Texas was hit by a severe thunderstorm. But it wasn't the thunder that frightened people. Is that a shower of rocks falling from the sky? Nope, it's hail. In parts of the state, golf ball-sized hail fell out of the sky with such force it shattered the windows of cars on the streets.
Oh my god, yours is shattered too!
Yep, I'm sure my top one is.
Your front window's cracked!
Mine's cracked pretty bad.
Mine too.
It was already cracked previously on the way to welding.
Oh my gosh!
Because it hit a series of highly populated areas, initial estimates for the cost of the damage were upwards of $3 billion. Yeah, that's billion with a B. Now, most hailstones are roughly pea-sized, so how did these stones get so big? Well, hail forms when condensate is pulled up into the colder layers of the atmosphere by strong, warm updrafts. The longer it stays up there bouncing off other cooling condensate, the bigger the hailstones can grow. They then drop when they become too heavy to be supported by the updraft. This was something Samuel Bator learned the hard way. Oh my god, if I were Samuel, I'd have been cowering in the footwell. The only thing scarier would have been if he were out in the open when it hit. Back in 2016, a sudden and very unexpected windstorm hit San Antonio, Texas, which was really bad news for one store having its roof repaired.
Hey, get over here! Oh my god. Oh my god! Oh wow! Is there a car park right there?
Man, Texas seems to have a lot of bad luck when it comes to extreme weather, huh? That's because the state has a lot of different climates. Out in the west, it's dry and hot. Down south, it's humid. In the north, it's dry, cold, and wet. And to the east, it's hot and humid. The warm, moist, cold, and dry fronts clashing constantly mean the weather is stirred up in very unpredictable ways. This is why it's either glorious sunshine and clear skies, or deadly hail and massive windstorms. I guess everything really is bigger in Texas. On February 17, 2022, Europe was hit by Storm Eunice. This clash of multiple cold and warm fronts of air whipped up some deadly winds, though the most dramatic of them was captured on camera in a courtyard in Poland. Winds of more than 100 miles per hour lashed the capital of Krakow, damaging more than 50 homes and leaving 324,000 people without power. This was considered the worst storm Poland had weathered in more than 30 years. Over in the neighboring Czech Republic, freak weather also became an issue back in 2021. A rare and violent F4 tornado suddenly formed in South Moravia region, with wind speeds of up to 260 miles per hour. It was the most powerful tornado the country had ever seen, and it devastated the South Moravian region, wreaking roughly $700 million worth of damages. In Europe, a tornado this strong is an incredibly rare event. This is because tornadoes form when an updraft of warm, humid air collides with cold, dry air. If there are winds present that sharply change direction, the updraft will begin to rotate. If sinking cold air near the ground also begins to rotate, the spiraling winds formation tightens, forcing the funnel cloud down instead of out towards the ground. But the weather is rarely extreme enough around Europe to produce winds this strong, which made this tornado even more terrifying. Over in places like the Black Sea, where there's an abundance of warm, humid air and cold fronts, tornadoes are much more common. So common that even when 12 tornadoes were spotted forming along the coast back in 2017, this pilot made light work of flying straight through them. I'm surprised that plane can fly considering the weight of the pilot's balls of steel. Back in July 2021, staff and customers at a car dealership in Traverse, Pennsylvania were forced to take cover when a tornado hit the premises. Initially, it didn't look too bad, but when the winds really started to pick up, they made the decision to hunker down in the bathroom. When they emerged less than 2 minutes later, the sheer scale of the destruction left them all stunned.
This just did not happen. Bro, look at the cars, bro. Nah.
The showroom was completely destroyed, but that wasn't the worst part. The cars and buildings had been decimated. It turned out this was an F3 tornado, with winds as high as 140 miles per hour. A tornado outbreak had occurred in the area, lasting for 23 hours, and while more than 20 F1 tornadoes were recorded, this was the only F3. Man, I hope this dealership's insurance is better than their luck. While being in one of those cars would have been terrifying, it wouldn't have compared to the horror that a few tourists traveling through Polotsk, Belarus faced back in August 2021. They were driving down a road when they noticed a swirling cloud above them. But when they looked a little further, they saw something happening to the trees. Terrified, they started to reverse back, but before they knew it, the storm was on top of them. It's not clear if this was a tornado, but considering the winds were strong enough to bring down an entire row of huge trees, it's amazing these tourists made it out alive. But high winds don't have to form a tornado to cause chaos, as Hurricane Zeta proved back in 2020. I can almost hear that shed saying, "I must go, my planet needs me." Unlike a tornado, a hurricane is a storm that forms over tropical waters and has wind speeds exceeding 74 miles per hour. While they're not always as fast as tornadoes, Zeta's 115 mile per hour wind speeds still manage to wreak $4.4 billion of damage in total. As chaotic as hurricanes can be, there's a part of them that's notoriously serene: the eye. It looks relatively small in satellite images, but in reality, they can reach a whopping 60 miles across. And while the tropical storm rages, the weather in the eye is actually alarmingly peaceful. This is the center of the hurricane, the point about which the storms rotate. While scientists don't know for sure why the eye of the storm forms, what they do know is that air inside the eye sinks down and gets warmer, feeding the winds that make up those storms' cloud banks, known as the eye wall. This one in particular is the eye of Hurricane Dorian, a Category 5 hurricane boasting 185 mile-per-hour winds. It's incredibly clear and calm, but the minute the plane hits the eye wall, it's like a blanket of rain. Now, if you thought that eye wall looked intimidating, get ready to feast your eyes on Arcus clouds, also known as shelf clouds. These ominously low horizontal cloud formations frequently form along the leading edge of a thunderstorm, so if you see one, you know you're in for some bad weather. They're so intimidating, people have taken to photoshopping them over unsuspecting cities and waterfronts. And even though they're fake, they still look terrifying. Even so, one of the real and most menacing examples of these are the roll clouds that form over Lake Michigan. Because of Michigan's location and topography, it's prone to a lot of low-lying cold wind blowing in from the Arctic. When these meet the warm, humid air rising off the lake, the water vapor condenses quickly, less than 100 feet from the ground in clouds that seem to roll at a phenomenal speed. But if you want them to look even more ominous, time lapses taken from the ground like this show how they can loom menacingly when followed by a thundercloud. In general, roll clouds can stretch as long as 600 miles and form when the cooler air of a thunderstorm encounters warm, humid air that lifts it, producing a shelf of condensate. When they're combined with cumulonimbus thunderheads, the dense, towering clouds formed from powerful upward air currents, they can appear like massive alien motherships on the horizon. Wait, I've seen Independence Day. I know where this is going. Sometimes shelf clouds as dramatic as this can indicate the presence of something called a supercell. These are thunderstorms that contain a mesocyclone, a deep, persistently rotating updraft within them, the kind that can start tornadoes. Just 30% of supercells produce tornadoes, but as you can see from this time lapse from Canada back in 2019, they're still terrifying without them. However, even without a supercell, there are some shelf clouds like this that are beyond intimidating. This one appeared above Traverse City, Michigan, back in 2021, shooting out lightning at every opportunity. Whew, I've never been happier not to live in Michigan. When it comes to lightning though, few storms can compare to this time lapse taken over Kansas back in 2021. Really makes you realize how much electricity there is in these storms. But how exactly do they form? Well, when molecules from water and ice in the clouds collide, they create regions of positive and negative charge. When a region of a cloud gathers an excess electrical charge, strong enough to break down the insulating air resistance around it, it creates a discharge of electricity, which we call lightning. Lightning is roughly 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and as it strikes, the air around the discharge heats up rapidly, creating a shock wave, and it's this sudden shock wave that we hear as thunder. What's really astonishing though, is that there are roughly 1.4 billion lightning strikes a year. That's more than 3 million flashes a day, or 44 strikes every second. Somehow that's not too hard to believe when you see time lapses of huge lightning storms like this raging over Kansas. But sometimes a single lightning strike on the ground can be more terrifying than millions of them in the sky, as one poor woman in Louisiana found out back in 2020. Whoa, that came out of nowhere. This terrifying occurrence is called a bolt from the blue. This is a lightning strike that comes out of the back of a thunderstorm, travels a long distance, and then strikes the ground seemingly out of nowhere. This is why it's best to stay indoors for at least 30 minutes after a storm has passed. Advice this cat apparently passed up on. You're supposed to run away from the danger, idiot. No wonder cats need 9 lives. When it comes to unexpected weather events though, storms in Australia really know how to turn it up to 11.
Oh my god! Oh. Oh my god, our trampoline is gone. Oh my god, the cubby house. Oh my god.
Whoa. In almost no time, the winds of this Queensland storm from December 2020 became strong enough to yeet this trampoline into the air like it was a paper bag. But what's astonishing is that Queensland had experienced a scorching heat wave in the days before. That's what you call a weather 180. This is quite a common occurrence though, as thunderstorms thrive when there's an excess of moisture and rapidly rising warm air. All this hot air rising creates turbulence in the atmosphere, and as the moisture cools and freezes the higher up it's drafted, rain and hail begin to form. In other words, a heat wave can ironically create the perfect storm. Over in Canberra, Australia, back in January 2020, a group of workers were having lunch outside when all of a sudden, this happened. They were being pelted with stones roughly 2 inches across. These things were bigger than golf balls. At this size and weight, huge hailstones like this fall at speeds between 44 and 72 miles per hour. But when it comes to unexpected weather, the events of February 2021 were arguably some of the worst. An extreme cold wave brought record low temperatures to most of Canada, the US, and parts of Mexico, with southern states like Texas breaking record low temperatures that hadn't been seen in decades. As a result, overloaded power grids failed, pipelines froze, and pipes burst catastrophically in homes that hadn't been built to withstand temperatures lower than -2 degrees Fahrenheit. In Texas alone, this racked up nearly $200 billion in damages, making this winter storm the single costliest natural disaster in Texas's history. It's believed this was fallout from the polar vortex, a large region of rotating cold air in the Arctic collapsing earlier in January. Part of it was forced over North America, bringing all that cold air with it. This isn't the first time it's happened, and thanks to climate change, it probably won't be the last either. So if you're watching from over in Texas, I'd trade your cowboy boots in for some snow boots. You're gonna need them in the future. Which of these storms did you think was the most extreme? And have you ever caught any terrifying weather on camera? Let me know down in the comments below, and thanks for watching.